Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Philly Factor. I'm your host, Paul Perrello. They say timing is everything, and that really applies to today's program because here we are in the season of Halloween, which seems goes from August now right through November. I remember when I was a kid, Halloween was one day, but now it's an entire season. But it gives me a reason to introduce my guest because he has written a book about the behind the scenes machinations of the movie Scream. And Padraic Maroney joins us. And the name of the book is It All Began with a Scream. And Padraic, I want to thank you for spending some time with us to talk about your book.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Paul.
And I said timing is everything because, here we are as we take this program. It's the middle of October. Halloween is right around the corner. But I think you would agree, like most people, that Halloween seems to have morphed into a month-long plus celebration. But more importantly, is that your book is released on what is an anniversary of the movie Scream, correct?
Yep. In December, it'll be 25 years since the original Scream was released in theaters.
And what I like about books like yours, and you've done a wonderful, wonderful job with the book, is I personally like those books that really go behind the scenes, go behind the pages of the script, talk with the cast members and the crew who participated in the initial run of the film. And that's what you've done here. I mean, you get into some of the nitty gritty behind the scene tales of the movie Scream. And even, I guess, some of the challenges that Wes Craven even was confronted with in making this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I approached it initially as a celebration of the movies, with the anniversary and as a fan of the movies. But there was so much that went into making it that I don't think that the casual viewer knew about, Wes, butting heads with the producers at Dimension, the Weinsteins, or the way that Scream 3 had to be rewritten right before they started shooting. So that there were a lot of things that I think will hopefully help people appreciate the movies more, knowing what it took to get them onto the screen.
I want to get into the backstory a little bit of what brought you to writing about the movie and writing the book. It all began with a Scream. But one thing that I found fascinating, and I guess this happens with a lot of movies, the cast. I mean, it's a pretty stellar cast given today's standards, but back 20 plus years ago, they were the majority of the cast members, except maybe Drew Barrymore, they were pretty much relatively unknown. Would you agree?
Yeah, a lot of them were just starting out when the movie came out and when they got cast. Drew Barrymore was known obviously for E.T. and everything, and that's kind of, with her being in the opening, what was kind of shocking at the time, because people would have expected that she would have played the Sidney Prescott role, but she's only in the movie for 12 minutes.
Yeah, it sort of harkens back to the Alfred Hitchcock theory of movies, especially the movie Psycho, where Janet Leigh, thank you, is actually killed off. Hopefully, I'm not ruining this for anybody that hasn't seen the original Psycho, but she's killed off in the first 20 minutes of the movie, which was unheard of to have a marquee name like Janet Leigh, killed off in the first 20 minutes of a blockbuster like Psycho. But I don't know. Did Wes Craven, is he paying homage to Hitchcock by doing that, or that was just part of the storyline?
So actually, what happened was Drew was cast in the lead role of Sidney because back in the 90s, horror was actually kind of dead. Like, it was a dead genre. There wasn't too much that was happening with it. So you didn't have a ton of, like, there wasn't the big name actors that were going and, really trying to get into those movies. But Drew, the script was so good that Drew did sign on to be the lead. And then it was actually her idea to take over the role as Casey Becker. And in the book, they talk a little bit that, with scheduling and everything, maybe that's what led for part of her decision, but also she thought it would be a good idea to catch the audience off guard like Hitchcock did. But it was really Drew Barrymore, and Drew Barrymore actually had a lot to do with creating little things in the legacy of the movie that, you wouldn't, like, with that and different ways that she had her hands in things that you wouldn't necessarily think that an actor or actress who comes in and isn't a producer or isn't as involved in the behind the scenes would be, because it's actually one of the things that we also can thank her for is the voice of Ghostface. She wanted to play her scene against an actor and not just have someone reading a line behind a camera. So they hired Roger Jackson to play the scene with the intention that they would dub the lines over with another actor, but he just knocked it out of the park and was so amazing that they kept him.
Was it the intent of Wes Craven to have not only Scream, but then the subsequent sequels to it? Was he just looking at doing one movie, but then given the success of Scream, he decided he wanted to do more than one movie?
So Kevin Williamson, who wrote Scream, when he sold the script, he had a rough outline of what a sequel would be. And he did kind of have an idea that it would be a trilogy if it did well, which initially when they were making it, they didn't know if anyone was ever going to see the movie because, again, how horror movies were being received at that point. But he did have plans for sequels in the works in his mind.
I want to get into what led you to your fixation with the movie Scream, that it led you to actually writing this book. As I understand it, you begged your brother when you were young, when the movie first came out, and maybe begged isn't the right word, but maybe coerced him into taking you to the movies to see Scream. I mean, of all the movies that you could get fixated on, Patrick, you decided that you had to see this movie. So what was your fixation with it that you needed to see this movie?
I don't know. It was me and a group of friends that wanted to go. We were in middle school, so we weren't old enough to go on our own. I've always been a horror movie fan and a Wes Craven fan. And it's funny because Scream came out the weekend that Beavis and Butthead's movie came out, so you would have thought that, teenage guys, we would have wanted to go see Beavis and Butthead. But there was just something, it looked like it was different. It looked like it was going to be fun and not just your standard typical horror movies. So we talked my brother into taking a rowdy group of, I think there were 5 of us, to a movie theater on opening night. And he actually had to argue with the ticket taker because back then they were like cracking down on R-rated movies and you had to have an actual parent. So he had to like fight with them because he's 7 years older than me. So, he was in his 20s or just about 20, but he was persuasive. And I think, and I actually went back, I think it's second time opening weekend even. And I know some of my other friends, their parents took them a second time. So it was just something that resonated with us.
Lucky for you that you went and saw Scream and you didn't go see Beavis and Butthead, because this show would have a totally different take and a totally different subject matter if we were doing an interview if you got hooked on Beavis and Butthead, right?
Yes, very much, very different. I was going to say, it's funny, I was taking a film class in college and we had to watch Beavis and Butthead Do America. So it kind of came back around.
How many times then? So you said you saw it with your brother, then you saw it a second time that opening weekend. Outside the parameters of writing the book, where you probably have gone back and watched it multiple times. How many times have you actually watched Scream then?
I mean, over the course of 25 years, I don't even know that I could count. I mean, I've seen it enough even prior to writing the book that I could freely quote it, not line for line, but I can definitely quote more than the average bear, so to speak. So I mean, I've seen it probably dozens of times prior to writing the book.
You decide you're going to write this book, and as I said, you do offer us, the reader, and whether you're a casual movie fan or a diehard movie fan, this book really does give us an inside, behind the set type of look at what went into the making of this movie. So you decide that you're going to write this book, and in order for the book to be successful as it is, you really need to, lift that veil and get behind the scenes and talk to the cast members. How difficult or how easy was it for you to enlist the help of the actors, actresses, filmmakers, cast and crew to actually help you in your mission?
So I have to say, once it was a little slow getting the ball rolling because, I was emailing, just cold emailing their people and reaching out on social media. But once I got one or two, the ball really started rolling a lot more. A lot of them are still friends all these years later. They still talk regularly. So I think it was kind of, oh, well, you talk to Marianne Maddalena, the producer. I trust that if she spoke to you, then I can trust you. So it was kind of one of those type things. And as the list grew, I think more and more people got to be very comfortable. Some people connected me with each other. And that's the other thing. Everyone was very generous with their time, sharing pictures that I have in the book, connecting me with other people. It was, you could tell that this wasn't just a job for any of them, that Scream really meant things to them and their life or their career. Liev Schreiber, he was one of the first people that I interviewed, and he was talking about how, when he did the first movie, he had such a small role and he wasn't really known. And as his career grew and he did the subsequent movies, like it kind of mirrored him. So you could see how that really meant something to him being in these movies and how much he really loved being around Wes and Marianne and Kathy and everyone.
It's remarkable that that they responded to you, but I guess because the project itself meant so much to them, that's why they responded to you. It's not like the movie was a total disaster or a bomb and they wanted to distance themselves from the project. But like you said, because in many cases this was the starting point for many of these superstars' careers, that's why they wanted to speak to you about it.
Yeah, I do a chapter in the book about a pseudo Scream reunion movie called Cursed, which was a werewolf movie that came out in 2004. And that was, what, like you just said, it was a cursed production. They had to film it like 4 times. So I didn't necessarily reach out and talk to people about that because some of them probably would rather just move on. And I don't want to open any wounds on anyone, but the people that I spoke to from the Scream movies, I brought up Cursed and we talked about that and I got some good insight from them. But yeah, I think, like you said, this really does hold a special place for many of them.
So now you are in a position of having all this information, and you decide that you are now going to put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard, and you're going to start writing this book. And I guess, as well, from what I read, the fact that the pandemic hit when it hit, it sort of gave you some of the time and the place maybe to concentrate all your efforts. Because look, I think everybody, would like to write a book. They may say, well, I don't have the time to write the book. I don't have the mindset to write the book. So given, this suspended state of animation that we continue to hang in here because of the pandemic, did that help you in your mission then to finally complete the book?
Yeah, because I actually got the idea to write the book in October 2019. But with everything going on in life, I didn't I kind of did like some precursory, like talking to some friends of mine that had written books and kind of was like, what do you think of this? But it wasn't until the pandemic hit that I was like, I've got the extra time. And also, everyone's trapped at home. So maybe they have time to speak with me and will want to. I figured, that it might make it a little bit easier to get a hold of people. But I think the pandemic definitely, because it was in April after we'd been home for like 2 months, I was like, let me give this a try. Let me see if there's a publisher who's interested. And my publisher at Bear Manor Media, Ben Omar was on board immediately with it. He liked the idea. So we were off to the races pretty quickly. And then I got started reaching out to people.
There are many stories that are included in the book, but is there one story or one anecdote that is shared with you, either with the cast or the crew, about the making of the movie that sticks out? I mean, you've included so many great stories in there, and not to put you on the spot, but is there one that sticks out like, gee, I never would have thought of that, or I was unaware of that, or wow, that's something I never heard before?
There were a couple. Jamie Kennedy who's a Philadelphia local. He gave some insight into his death scene in the second movie. His parents were visiting, so that added like an extra element to it. So that was a fun story. Also, Lynn McCree, who played Maureen Prescott, she had a fun story about a kissing scene that she had with an actor who had bad breath and how that was handled. And I know personally, I always love to hear about the casting stories and like think of in an alternate dimension who could have played what roles. So I think that was pretty interesting to me also.
It was my understanding that there were problems, Jake, with I guess some script treatments that were sort of leaked, and that caused a little bit of concern in the making of the movies.
Yeah, with the second one, because there was such a quick turnaround, Kevin Williamson was in the process of shooting the pilot for Dawson's Creek. So he was in Wilmington, North Carolina, working on that. And the producer, Marianne Madalena and Julie Plec, had to go down and visit him to try to get the finished script out of him, because Scream 1 came out in December 1996, and they were shooting the sequel by May.
Wow.
So they had because the first three movies they had to shoot at that they had to shoot during the summer hiatus because Neve Campbell and Courtney Cox both had their TV shows. So they were always kind of locked into a specific type of time frame. So they were kind of rushing with that. And then with the third movie, Columbine happened right before they were getting ready to go into production. So they had to kind of scrap the idea that they had for the third movie. And by that point, Kevin Williamson wasn't really going to be available to write a new script. So they brought in a different writer for it. So they had so there were some scripting issues with in terms of the timeline for those two movies.
Would you say, in your opinion, I mean, it would seem, and we talked a little earlier in the interview, that horror movies in the genre really were not taking the world by storm that perhaps they are like today. But would you say that the Scream franchise sort of kickstarted or reinvigorated the genre? Because it just seems to me that that was a turning point. I mean, back in the, we had all of the, the monster movies in the 50s, and then, Psycho came around, and there were all these classic, scary movies. And then it just seemed like they fell out of sorts with moviegoers. But would you agree that Scream sort of turned the corner for the genre?
Yeah, I think what happened was in the late 80s, kind of audiences got tired of the countless sequels of Jason and Michael Myers and Freddy, where they would seemingly die or be vanquished at the end of the movie and then come back, a year and a half later. And so I think that with that, the horror genre kind of went out of fashion, and it was looking for a reinvention, and I think that's what Scream offered. It had the self-referential meta take where the characters had seen Halloween, they had seen all of the Jamie Lee Curtis movies, and the Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th movies that we had all seen. So they knew what the rules were, and there was humor to it, which when I was interviewing some of the actors, they said they're not fans of horror in general, but because there was the mystery element and the humor, that made it okay for them to watch Scream. And I think that's part of what has kept the franchise fresh and as popular, is that it has that humor. So people who are not so much into standard horror movies are able to use this kind of as a gateway, and they're like, okay, I'll be terrified with this movie, but it'll also allow me to laugh a little bit and go along for the ride.
Let me ask you personally then, what has this whole experience meant for you? I mean, here, was this a passion of yours as a kid to see this movie? You turned this passion into sort of a career, not sort of a career, but a career in journalism and in writing. So what has this whole experience been like for you?
So I'm going to be turning 40 in a year or two. So it feels very, full circle to have this coming out now, and for a book about Scream to be my first book, and to be able to talk to so many of the cast and crew, and to be able to see that, because they're seeing how much Scream means to the fans. Since I started writing the book, I joined a bunch of online Scream groups, and just seeing how much it means to them. And at the same time, it means so much to the people who made it also, I think is really special. So I think it's really it makes me feel really good that I can give something that, kind of bridges those two and shows how the people who made the movies feel about it to the people who love it and how it affected them as viewers.
One final question for you. Was this your first attempt at a book that it got option to go to press, or have you written like 10 other books and this happened to be lucky number 11?
No, this was my first attempt to, I'd written just stories for fun and like novels for fun, but nothing that I ever tried to get published. This was my first book that I tried to actually get published, and everything.
Which leads me to my question then, for those other aspiring writers that are out there who, whether it's Scream or whether it's movie musicals or whatever, that they would like to write a book about, what type of advice in a minute or two, can you give our viewers who are looking to write a book, and and they know that it's not necessarily easy to get that book published?
I think so I always go into things probably with rose-tinted glasses and not realizing how much work is involved. Looking at it from the other side, I would say make sure that what you are writing about, that it's something that you are passionate about or do actually care about, because you're going to be with this for a year, 2 years, 3 years. So, and it requires a lot of research and reading. So if you're not invested in it, I think that is going to make it feel much more tedious. But also, I think, I got very lucky that the publisher that I went to, that Ben was on board and that he understood the vision. But I think, but at the same time, when I reached out to publicists, I got turned down by some of them because their clients either weren't available for interviews or whatnot, scheduling. And so I think the other thing is to just not let rejection detour you. I think, you really have to just keep going. I got a couple people who said no, but then once I got the first 2 people to say yes, it started to all snowball much faster. So if you give up if you get discouraged in the beginning, you might be giving up right before you hit that turn.
Well, we could go on and on and on. This is a wonderful book, and whether you're a fan of Scream, whether you're a fan of movies, this is a book that you want to pick up. It is now available. It all began with The Scream by Padraic Maroney. And I want to thank you for your time and continued success. Best of luck. And I look forward to speaking with you again real soon in the future.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for tuning into the Philly Factor. We'll catch you on the other side.